Hello everyone, it's Attacker72 here, and for today, welcome back to another review video, where this time I'm going to be reviewing probably one of the biggest surprises I've seen people talk about in the gaming community, and that is the newest life simulator in the block, Pokemon Pokopia. Now, when this game came out, I was a bit skeptical at first. If you all saw some of my past videos where I've mentioned Pokopia at least a few times, you would know that I have stated my doubts as well as skepticism towards this new spin-off title. I thought it was mostly just going to be another attempt for Pokemon trying to do like an Animal Crossing of some sorts, or that it was just going to be an odd cash grab or some case, and I was sort of skeptical about it even further when it was revealed to be a key card further. So yeah, I didn't really pay too much attention to Pokopia for a while. But then as time goes on, before the game had come out, the reviews came in, and to a lot of people's shock, including mine, this game garnered a good amount of positive reception, all of these scores ranging from around 9 to a 10, with the lowest score by far being an 8, but that still is very impressive. Seeing how much positive reception and how many people were talking about Pokopia the day it actually came out, and really, this is coming between the couple months of like the gap between Animal Crossing New Horizons Switch 2 edition as well as Tomodachi Life Living the Dream. It definitely does feel as if Pokopia was sort of a special case, and after about a couple months after the game had released, I bought it. If you all saw on my community post, I played for around a good 20 to 30 hours, and I've honestly had quite a lot to say about this, as well as some some things I wasn't really a fan of and all. So I'm going to be reviewing this as per usual with mostly the same thoughts I've had with some of my last review videos, such as the quality and presentation, the gameplay, and most notably the story of it, as well as some, different, there's also some cons to really point out to the most at the very end of it. So I do hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let's see whether or not that Pokemon Pokopia is really worth the purchase of $70. Now, to start things off, as I always do in a lot of these review videos, it's always the visuals and presentation. Now, for this being a life simulator game with a mixture of Pokemon, I do think the idea as well as the visual standpoint definitely is on par with the art direction they're going with. Though when I first saw this, I really couldn't help but think that this looks almost identical to Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl in terms of like graphics and such, but thankfully this wasn't developed by Ilka. As it turns out, this game was actually developed by Omega Force, who you may not know is actually a division of Koei Tecmo, who are mostly known for a ton of series, most notably the Warriors franchise. So obviously they have a lot of experience, and they have worked with a few bits with companies before like Square Enix and obviously Nintendo, as I said. But yeah, the visual for the art direction, it is solid at best, though in some areas I do think it gives me so much of a Minecraft feel due to every other area and structure being literally blocks of all things. So that I really don't mind. I really do like how the game looks, if anything. I don't really think this feels Switch 2 worthy, even since after all, Pokopia is indeed a Switch 2 exclusive, but for the art direction that they're going with, especially with the feeling of a cozy Pokemon life simulator, they definitely did a good job. Again, I did feel like it was almost similar to another bad Pokemon game at first, but I did kind of get used to it, and it definitely does go for the direction that the Pokemon company was intended for. So, surprisingly, Pokopia does have a story, which isn't really too shocking for a series like Pokemon, in which its spin-offs gets like a ton of different stories depending on which franchise or genre they're going to. But for a game that is basically Pokemon with a life simulator aspect of it, I am surprised that they managed to tell a pretty interesting story. So in this case, it takes place in a post-apocalyptic world of Kanto. And yes, I know Kanto has been reused, it has been used a lot at that point, it has overstayed its welcome, but I do think the usage of Kanto here is a really interesting idea in my opinion. Then to mention the actual story aspect of itself, you play as a Ditto, which takes form of their trainer, and in there you'll be able to meet with a character named Professor Tangrowth, to which he explains that all of the humans in the world of Pokemon had basically disappeared, and it's mostly just himself as well as all of the other Pokemon that you are now yet to find in this very post-apocalyptic world, and it's your job job as the Ditto to basically regrow all of its habitats, rebuild all of the world, and as well as trying to find the remaining humans that have likely left some sort of clues. And every so often, whenever you're out there exploring, you'll be able to find things like journals and, dev hacks and such, which does explain some lore implications as to likely what happens to the humans here and there while befriending Pokemon, as well as meeting some new original Pokemon made for this game, like the Moslax, for example, and a pale version of Pikachu. So I do think the story here is pretty unique. It does give a reason as for you to explore and to pretty much regrow this world of Kanto. Not to mention, with new areas that you explore in, it gives a lot of new discoveries and hints as to basically what happened during this whole post-apocalyptic world. I really do think this is one of the more unique stories that the Pokemon Company and Game Freak have garnered. I will say kudos to them for making such a pretty cool story. Overall, it is definitely interesting to see them do a more interesting direction, even though they are reusing Kanto for like the 10th time at this point. Now we get to the biggest important part of Pokopia, and that is the gameplay, which I will say the gameplay of it is what really makes it stand out to some of the other life simulator games that I've talked about in the past. So many tend to point out this game having a huge homage of a few notable titles. Many tend to point out that yes, this game is mostly like Animal Crossing as well as Minecraft, due to the fact that the entire world of this apocalyptic Kanto is just full of blocks for no reason. So it has some building blocks that basically is resembling the Minecraft, but there are two games specifically that I will say stands out the most in terms of the gameplay portion of it, and that's what most reviewers tend to point out to the most. Most notably, Viva Pinata, which I've only played like a good hour of Viva Pinata on the Xbox like years ago, but I don't really remember what this game was all about. After looking at a few gameplay clips, honestly, I could definitely see the resemblance to Viva Pinata, but then there's also Dragon Quest Builders 2, which, funny enough, was also a game that was developed by Omega Force and is also on the Nintendo Switch. So it definitely does seem that they have some good connections to it. So I can see all of these four games together, most notably these two, basically being the big inspiration for Pokopia. But what exactly does it do aside from it being a life simulator? Well, aside from it being a life simulator where you are expected to come in every day whenever you have the chance to check on the world of Kanto, here you play as a Ditto, and you first start off by basically customizing your look of the character. Once you're mostly gone through, you are treated with a lot of tutorials, like a ton of tutorials that mostly gives you the basics of things, which isn't really too bad, but you mostly get like a tutorial for like every new ability as well as some new things that you are discovering as you go on with your playthrough. But one of the best things and is most notable about Pokopia and what makes it stand out is that when you befriend a Pokemon, you also get their ability. Like for example, when you befriend a Squirtle, you'll gain the water gun ability, which allows you to water the grass and goes from dry grass to pretty much good natural grass. That also goes the same thing for things like plants, where if you have a Bulbasaur, you'll learn the leafage ability, which can allow you to create habitats like tall grass, for example. And that's another major gameplay aspect of it. The habitats take a lot of advantage with the Pokemon dependent on which environment you're in. Like for example, the Squirtle will like to live in like at least 4 to 6 patches of tall grass in which you use your leafage to basically make them a home for themselves. Not to mention with them also having the ability to craft, which definitely gives off the Minecraft-like ability of the gameplay. It definitely does seem as if they've taken a lot of inspiration to these games while also making it stand out on its own. With the ability to craft, you are able to give Pokemon specifically their homes or just small things to at your own pace and leisure, which really is cool. Not to mention having to use the habitats to your advantage by using the specific Pokemon that you have is really cool in my opinion. Other than with the advantage of having the Pokemon abilities as the Ditto, learns to grow and transform into them, we even got the daily challenges, which is essentially like a similar thing to Animal Crossing New Horizons own challenges, where you mostly have to like water some grass or talk to Pokemon here and there, and there you'll get a lot of Poké Dollars, and these Poké Coins here can allow you to buy things like structures, for example, as well as small other things like, furniture for your house, for example, or even building kits, which that's another thing. Each Pokemon also, aside from their own abilities, have a very unique personality and distinct gimmick as like their own abilities. Like for example, the Charmander is allowed to shoot fire to a smelting furnace, or for things such as a Scyther who is able to cut wood into lumber. All of these Pokemon have very unique abilities with distinct personalities that makes them stand out to one another, and you having to learn each Pokemon from their character is really great. Not to mention having to do side quests is also another point of Pokopia, aside from like the main quest where you either have to build the Poke Center once again or even do bigger quests while also meeting some new original Pokemon in the process. The gameplay of it is really relaxing and cozy, which is definitely the intent that the Pokemon Company is going for. I really do enjoy everything about this game, and after playing this for like a good 20 to 30 hours, I can really see why the reviews love this. It is cozy, and while I will say there are a few things that I'm not really a fan of, first off, the camera and the movement can be a little bit finicky at times, and whenever I try to move in order to use my ability, it does seem that the range I use some of my Pokemon abilities to, like, you know, water grass or use the inhaling ability, it does feel as if the camera tends to like not function at all. But overall, I do think it is really great. The gameplay is by far the best aspect of it, and it does take its time slowly, which you mostly have to wait either some time to, like, you know, get things through. Like for example, you mostly have to wait till nighttime to get this one specific Pokemon in a very specific habitat that you have to make. But yeah, the gameplay, I will say, is the best part of Pokopia. But that's really all I want to say about this game. However, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. Why is Pokopia a keycard? No, that really was what shocks me the most about this game. Like, the gameplay is amazing, the story is pretty surprising, and while the visuals tend to be pretty odd at first, it does take some time to get used to. But what generally bogs this score down a huge margin was definitely the fact that Pokopia is a keycard. When they first announced this, a lot of people, including myself, were shocked. I made a video talking about this, and it really makes me confused as to why they thought it was a good idea to make this a key card. You would have expected this game was pretty large in terms of gigabyte size. Like, there are some times where key cards tend to like actually work because of how huge the storage is, and we know by then that key cards aren't universally loved. They're very divisive at best, and for some games I could understand, like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which has over 100 gigabytes of storage, as well as the upcoming Elden Ring game that will be on the Switch 2. That right there will basically be a key card because of the high storage. But then there's Pokopia. You would have thought that with such many things you can do, like building houses, building things for your leisure, and taking it at your own pace, you would have thought that it'd be like pretty large in terms of gigabyte size. But no, when you look at the box art, the game is actually around 10 gigabytes. So I'm generally confused as to why they thought it was a good idea to make this a key card. It's basically the same vein as like Puyo Puyo Tetris, where they decided to make that a Switch 2 game, but also despite it being on the Switch 1, which had very low storage and was able to run well, they decided to make that a key card for absolutely no reason. So it makes me confused why this game particularly is a key card. And what makes this even shocking by the fact is that since this game was developed by Omega Force with the help from the developers, and again, since Omega Force is a division of Koei Tecmo, you know what game that came out not too long ago that is a first party title as well as a Switch 2 exclusive that was also not a key card? That was Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. That game was with the help of Koei Tecmo, and that game was around 44.9 gigabytes in storage. So I'm confused why this game, despite its large storage, was able to fit in a good physical cartridge, but Pokopia wasn't able to. It just kind of makes no sense to me. And with this being a key card, it did lead to people believing that it was going to be affecting a lot of other first-party titles too, especially when this mostly applies to a lot of third-party games and third-party developers. So far as of right now, that hasn't really happened yet, but this was such a really confusing decision, and it's what really makes this score pretty much lower than it. It would have been a 10 out of 10 if it wasn't for the key card, because if they didn't make this a key card whatsoever, then I'm pretty sure this game would have likely sold a lot more. It already sold like very well, even so, but yeah, a keycard thing, it really confuses me to this very day as to why the Pokemon Company decided to make this game a keycard anyway. So overall, with all of my thoughts put in together, in conclusion, is Pokemon Pokopia really worth the $70? Well, if you're looking for a game that is very cozy while also able to use your Pokemon abilities in proper, while also befriending Pokemon with their certain habitats, and just be able to create your very own version of the Kanto region, then this game is truly worth it. What really holds this back was definitely the pricing of $70, because I will say the $70 pricing is a bit too steep for a cozy game like this, and not to mention the keycard thing is definitely something that is holding this a lot more, that I'm pretty sure that if you are planning to get Pokopia, I do recommend just getting this game digitally if you're looking for a proper way to play this game, but with the gameplay aspect taking a lot of inspiration and homage to other life simulator games as well as some other notable titles, as well as a really interesting story, I would give Pokemon Pokopia a 9 out of 10. It is by far one of the most surprising games on the Switch 2, and is generally worth all the purchase. All I could say is that 2026 is really the year for a lot of life simulator games. A few months ago, we've already got to Animal Crossing New Horizons Switch 2 edition, and then afterwards we had Tomodachi Life Living the Dream that came out after the release of Pokopia, and with this new spin-off of the franchise, I can definitely see why the Pokemon Company didn't decide to make or release Winds and Waves this year and decided to like give this spin-off more time to shine. I'm really enjoying this at the moment, and I do plan on decorating my world a lot more, and I probably am planning to play this with some friends very soon. But yeah, this is such a worthwhile purchase. Really, the keycard thing and the pricing is definitely what's holding this back, but it is overall a worthwhile experience, hence why it will be a 9 out of 10. But I want to know all your thoughts and opinions down below on how you feel about this new spin-off title. Do you think it's truly worth all the purchase? And do you think this could be a new step in the right direction for the Pokemon Company? And do you think they might likely improve over time with their games? Who knows, really? But I want to know all your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments. And so with that, leave a like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell for more videos, follow my Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. And remember this, once a legend, always a legend.